Well, guys, I think we can go ahead and kick it off just for the sake of time. I've got about 20 minutes of program, and then we'll have plenty of opportunities for questions at the end. Really, the purpose of this presentation, it kind of serves, I think, three roles. Number one, it gives us a chance to talk a little bit about Tennessee Achieves and maybe tell you some of the things that we're doing that you maybe aren't aware of. Post-pandemic, kind of in the middle of the pandemic, we realized that we've done a really good job with certain groups of people talking about specific parts of our program, but we haven't always done a great job of telling our full story. I think it's easy to think of Tennessee Achieves as just a scholarship or just think of us as a mentor program, but we have a lot of things going on, and I think it's good to know about all of those as a local stakeholder. So we'll spend some time talking about our program in general. We'll talk just for a minute about Cumberland County data, about progress there, how students are faring, and then we'll wrap it up with some just kind of a call to action, some action items and ways that we can continue to move the needle in Cumberland County. But I'll go ahead and get this started here. My name's Ben Sterling. I serve as the Senior Director of Content at Tennessee Achieves. I've been on staff since June 2014, so in my 7th year here. I was a student in the program when it actually launched back in 2009, so I've seen the program since its inception from multiple perspectives, whether that's a student, a volunteer, or a staff person. So I'm always excited to bring the news about Tennessee Achieves. For those of you that aren't aware, Tennessee Achieves launched back in 2008, the class of 2009 in Knox County, and it was called Knox Achieves. And then in 2012, we expanded to 14 counties, and we became Tennessee Achieves at that point. And since 2012, we've grown ever since. With the class of 2015, we partnered with the Tennessee Promise Scholarship, which is when we launched in Cumberland County. So we'll be moving into our 7th cohort in Cumberland County with the class of 2022. Since that time, we've worked with over 440,000 students and we've recruited over 71,000 volunteers. And we'll talk a little bit more about our reach here on the next slide. So we're serving 90 counties across Tennessee, 74 of those deemed as rural counties. 35 of those are deemed at risk or distressed by the Department of Community and Economic Development. So I think our work is maybe as important as anywhere in those 35 counties that are in those economic conditions. In those 90 counties, we're working with over 600 high schools. That includes all of the public schools in those communities, private schools, charter schools, and home schools. When it comes to our post-secondary partners, our colleges, 67 of those, and you can see the breakdown in terms of where our students are enrolling. It probably comes as no surprise that most of our students are enrolling at a community college. They tend to have a larger capacity than the TCATs, and it also tends to be the most attractive option for the student that plans to transfer to a 4-year institution on down the road. But I think it is important to put your finger on that 11% enrolled at a TCAT, because that number has continued to grow. When we launched in 2015, that was at 8%. So we've increased by 3 percentage points there, and I think it continues to move up every year as TCATs become more diverse in terms of their program offerings and time slots and all of those things. So it is a growing industry. To talk a little bit more about our reach, we're working now annually with about 60,000 applicants. That equates to 89% of Tennessee's high school seniors. I think that's a number that our staff has a hard time wrapping its mind around. 89% is nearly every high school senior in Tennessee, and that means that nearly every high school senior in Tennessee gets an email from Tennessee Achieves, which is pretty crazy. And then you look at the community colleges, 78% of all first-time freshmen are Tennessee Achieves students, and then 86% of all Tennessee community college graduates are Tennessee Achieves students. So our program is involved in nearly every aspect of the high school to community college realm, totally involved in all of those communities. And then you look at the gray bars here in the middle. This is just simply a demographic overview. This isn't unique to Cumberland County. This is just as a state. 56% of students are eligible for federal financial aid. They are determined based on the FAFSA. So when the students submit their FAFSA, they provide parent income information, and that determines whether or not they're eligible for that need-based aid, the federal financial aid. Over half of our students are eligible for that. 40% of our students say that they're first generation college students. This is a self-reported metric. And we've done some work lately with a publication that's talking about first generation students. And it's probably one of the harder things to actually identify because everyone's definition for first generation is a little bit different. But the way that I see first generation is if you are the first person of the people that live in your house to go to college, you're a first generation college student. I think a lot of students often think that if their cousin went to college or their aunt went to college, that relegates them to this space of not being a first generation college student. And I disagree. It's your parents and your siblings. And I think it's a badge of honor to wear that. I wear it proudly as a first generation college student. And I would imagine, I think this number is probably higher. I would really like to know what that number really is. We actually did some work on this next metric. We were working with the National Science Board, presenting on serving actually first generation college students. And we were tasked with figuring out our students' majors. What all are they majoring in? And as we analyzed that data, it turns out over half of our students are in some sort of STEM related discipline. We had indicated health science here as separating it from STEM, but it is a STEM field, don't get me wrong. So over half of our students involved in some sort of STEM related discipline, whether that be in science, math, or technical training. So all of our students at TCATs would fall into this percentage as well. And I think that is important because as we look at our growing industrial landscape in Tennessee, look at a place like Cumberland County, industry is growing every day. There are jobs to be filled, and these people that are studying a STEM related major are setting themselves up with the skills and the qualifications to fill those roles. So I think it's really good. The bottom of this page, you'll see our cost. So Tennessee Promise annual cost is $32 million a year. This comes out to be about $1,000 per award. And then Tennessee Achieves annual operating cost is $2.5 million. This pays for things like my salary, our building that we operate in, our technology, just general operations. So let's talk about some of the things Tennessee Achieves is doing. If you've been engaged with us for very long, some of these are probably old hat, some of them may not be. The Tennessee Promise Scholarship obviously serves as the backbone of our organization. It's what brings the 60,000 students to us annually. We like to think of it sort of as the carrot to the rest of our work. It brings them to us, and then we surround them with all these other supports. The first one of those that they'll come into contact with is our volunteer mentor program. Most people, Eugene and Scott, I know for example, engaged with our program for the first time through our mentoring program. And this is a way that the community can support Tennessee Promise students. And again, it's the first sort of support that our students will come into contact with as they begin their work with Tennessee Achieves. And then community service requirement. Each student has to complete and submit 8 hours of community service. This is something that's been part of our program since we launched back in 2009. I think it remains as important as ever now, especially now that we're starting to survey our students, and 96% of them are glad that they did the community service. So I think it's creating a mindset shift for a lot of students. In terms of connecting them with the needs of their community, sharing with them things that they may not be aware of and wouldn't be aware of if it wasn't for this requirement. So I think there's a lot of value in it. The Tennessee Achieves summer programs are really aimed at students who have a lower ACT score, an ACT score below a 19, because those are the students that are typically taking learning support classes their first semester of college. And that can be intimidating for some students to have that additional responsibility to kind of prepare them for college level coursework. So we have the Summer Bridge Program and the Summer Institute, both aimed to help prepare students more academically and socially before they start college in the fall. The Summer Bridge Program is a 3-week program where they take English, reading, and math instruction, and then at the end they can try to test out of those learning support classes. Cumberland County is super unique because they've actually privately fundraised. Holly with Roane State has actually privately fundraised her own Summer Bridge program at the Cumberland County campus, which is unique. It's the only privately funded summer program in the state. So really, really cool there. We also have the Summer Institute, which is kind of like the Summer Bridge program, but multiply it by 10. It is a 10-week credit-bearing program for students who are in that same sort of situation in terms of their ACT scores and college readiness. This is a program that's only been operated in Memphis through the Southwest Tennessee Community College, one of their campuses there. And this program, for students that are successful in it, they enter college the fall following high school graduation with 9 college credit hours, and they don't have any learning support or remediation left. So they accomplish all of that during the program. This year was actually only 6 weeks. We were able to condense it down due to some COVID restrictions. We had to condense it a little bit, and we saw the same results: 100% success rate. 29 students entered college, far ahead of their peers, and these are students who were academically behind before. So really, really great success with this program, something I want to see continue to grow throughout the state. And then lastly, Complete. This is our coaching model that we launched with the class of 2019. Essentially, it takes the mentor program and carries it a little bit further. These are people that are on our staff that are assigned to a group of lower income students based on community college service area. So we take students based on their income. If they have below a certain threshold, they're paired with a coach on our staff who communicates with them every week. So they're tasked with reaching a certain percentage of connection with their student cohorts every month. So as they progress through their college experience, they build a relationship with this coach, and really in a hope that there's a layer of accountability for that student as they progress through to graduation. So we've seen some really nice success from this program. We'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in just a minute. And then the last thing we'll mention about kind of the work that we do is our targeted communication. Again, if you've been around Tennessee Achieves for very long, you know that we send a lot of emails. And so I think it's actually one of the things that makes Tennessee Achieves special is our ability to target communication and know where students are in the process. We're able to target a student if they are behind on a certain requirement and communicate with them directly with pieces of communication that highlight the need for that requirement or that step or enrollment or whatever that looks like. So as we continue to innovate in our communication, I think we can continue to innovate in the way that we serve students. And some of the other programs that we're sort of piloting across the state, we're finding better ways to figure out where students are in the process and continue to encourage them to complete all the steps necessary to enroll. So let's talk about some data in terms of FAFSA file rate and community service first. So that FAFSA file rate is important to us because we see that as the first step. So they complete Tennessee Promise application, then they file the FAFSA. And that's like in our eyes, the first step towards enrolling in college. You've got to do this. It's the free application for federal student aid. While it's a barrier for a lot of students, I would argue that in Tennessee, we have drastically reduced the barrier that it is. We lead the country in most years in FAFSA file percentage. I would argue that we have one of the most comprehensive FAFSA filing strategies in terms of a state that you can find because we see it as a priority. In Cumberland County, that number was a little bit lower than the state average. I think a lot of this could be attributed just to it being a pandemic year, and there was a lot of weird virtual, on-campus, hybrid learning, just situations where it just wasn't a normal year, and normal strategies weren't as effective as they usually were. So I think we'll see this bounce back in the coming year, I would imagine. And it's just, I think this is an outlier. In my mind, this year will go down as an outlier in a whole lot of different ways. And this is just one of those statistics. When you talk about community service, Cumberland County students have completed over 20,000 hours of community service, most of those hours being completed in the county. So in Cumberland County, in the community that they live. I always take this as an opportunity to say that if you work with a community organization and need volunteers, don't be bashful about advertising that to Tennessee Promise students. They need the hours. They're always looking for something to do, especially if it's outside and kind of engaging. If you have those types of opportunities, tell me, tell somebody on our staff, and we can get that out to the students and really make your event more successful typically. And then overall across the state, we've completed over 3 million hours of community service since 2009. So let's talk about student success, student data. So this is really a way for me to benchmark Cumberland County versus the state average. Tennessee, in terms of Tennessee Promise applicants, we had 495 students from the class of 2021. In terms of students enrolling, 150 enrolled. This is from the class of 2019, which shows us a first-year retention rate of 62%. They're really close to the statewide average. And then 3-year graduation rate is above the state average for the class of 2017. So while that number is a little bit lower in first-year retention, those that are hanging on are actually graduating at a higher rate than the state average. So I think that's all really nice to see. And that retention rate's close to the average, so not anything to be too concerned about. You zoom out just a little bit and start taking a look at the statewide data. You can see that our students are outpacing their peers by 14 percentage points in terms of fall-to-fall retention. We see this as an incredibly important metric because what we know is that if a student retains from fall to fall, their chances of graduation significantly increase. So all of our programs aim to increase that retention, the staying power of a student. So what this says to me is that our programs are typically working. If you look at the 6-year graduation rate, our students are 16 percentage points ahead of their peers. Again, I think this just speaks to the value of supports and the reason why the work that we're doing is important. Looking on the right-hand side of this screen, you'll see how our programming is affecting that fall-to-fall retention. Students participating in a summer program are outpacing their peers, or not outpacing their peers. They're 34% more likely to retain. Students that are incomplete, 23% more likely to retain. And then Knox Promise students are 42% more likely to retain. We haven't talked about Knox Promise, but essentially it's complete, but it's paired with what we call completion grants, which in a lot of other disciplines, they call it emergency funding. So basically you have a student who's running into some sort of financial hardship that's affecting their ability to succeed in college. We can take care of that financial hardship for that student through a generosity of Mr. Haslam here in Knoxville. The good news is that we've actually timed these county updates at a perfect time, is because we've rolled out statewide completion grants this week to students in every county. We've worked with the General Assembly to put together some funding to be able to pay for completion grants for students throughout the state. This is a limited amount of money, so we've capped it for students, but this is funding for things like groceries or gas or car repair or textbooks or materials, tools for a TCAT student. Things along those lines. So completion grants for us are a really big deal, and they're having an incredible impact on the success of students, as you can see how successful our Knox Promise students are in terms of their fall-to-fall retention. We're excited to see how this continues to progress as we've been able to roll it out statewide. With the limited amount of money that we've got, hopefully we can prove that this is a valuable asset and continue to grow that even more. So with all of the good news and progress that we've made, the pandemic certainly had its effect on college going rate. You can see that we had a significant drop with the class of 2020, almost 5 percentage points, or it was 5 percentage point drop in the college going rate. You can see back in 2015, when we launched Tennessee Promise, we had a 4.6% increase. So we've lost all that ground in 1 year. During the pandemic in Cumberland County, there was also a decrease, not quite as significant as the state's decrease. But what I think this says to me and our staff, and I think what it should say to everybody, is that this sort of is an all hands on deck situation. When you see the college going rate decline so significantly, what that means is that there are less students entering the pipeline. And normally when that happens, statistically, these are the students that need to be in college the most, who have the least amount of support around them, especially given their economic circumstances. So the students not going to college typically are students that we are trying to reach, whether they're our first generation or low income students. So in terms of how can you be all hands on deck, what does that even mean for a community member? For me, it means to be a mentor and tell your friends about our mentor program. The way I see a tnAchieves mentor is that they are as equally as important to the work of tnAchieves as our staff. They are on equal footing in terms of being a stakeholder with us. And they are the troops on the ground, the person on the front lines, communicating with students who are having problems or having struggles. The mentors are the ones that are coaching them through that. For those of you that have mentored with us over the years, in the previous years, back in like 2018, 2019, we had in-person meetings at the high schools. I've seen many of your faces at those, coordinating those meetings where mentors get to meet their students face to face and begin those relationships so that the communication is a little easier as you move along. Obviously, during the pandemic, that brought on a quick shift, pivot for us in terms of moving our program virtual. We invested with the help of Bank of America and a couple other partners. We were able to launch tnAchieves Connect, which is I think an incredible tool that is making the mentor program at tnAchieves significantly better. And it's something that made 2021 possible. If it wasn't for that, I don't know that we could have ran a virtual mentoring program. So moving into 2022, we heard from a lot of mentors that they wanted those in-person meetings back, if possible. So we're looking ahead to the future, and we're going to try to administer a hybrid mentoring experience. So we're going to have tnAchieves Connect. That's going to stay. You'll have the opportunity to meet virtually on there, message virtually on there. But we're also going to provide opportunities for you to meet in person with your students, if permitted, if we can do that in the spring. So what that'll look like for us, it's two different ways. First way is at a Tennessee Achieves open house, which is essentially we'll be partnering with our college partners, whether it's at TCAT with Cliff or at Roan State with Holly, and we'll secure some space. We'll have some tables there, and Tennessee Achieves staff member will be on campus from, let's just ballpark it, from 2 to 5. And from 2 to 5, we're there, and you as a mentor can invite your students to meet you at campus to meet face-to-face. We're not inviting anybody. That's all up to the mentor and the students to figure that out, but we'll be securing the space at the college on a specific day. If that doesn't work out for you, you can meet independently with your students. We'll also encourage that. If you have a safe space that you can do that in the public, certainly feel free to do it that way. But we are, I think, going to try to move in that direction in terms of trying to provide this hybrid model where everybody can mentor, and there will be a virtual way to do that and an in-person way to do that, depending on what it is that you want to do. I think that flexibility will be pretty cool in 2022. How do you become a mentor? Most of you already know, but if you don't, tnAchieves.org/mentors will tell you all that you need to know. The deadline to apply to be a mentor is December 3rd. So we would certainly love your help in terms of finding the 75 mentors needed in Cumberland County. All of you, I think, like I said, have mentored at some point in the past, but if you haven't, we'd love to have you. If you have, please tell your friends, encourage them to try it out. I think if there's any year to try it out, 2022 is going to be the year. We're trying a lot of new things. We've learned what works and what doesn't work virtually, so we're going to make that process easier and better. But then even much more, I think maybe more importantly, having that in-person option for those that want it will be really, really helpful. So how can you get involved? I've mentioned all hands on deck. What does that look like in the community that you live in? Again, I think the number one way to engage with our work is to be a mentor. But if you're not interested in mentoring, or you already are and you're looking for a step further, first one of those is to connect us with your community. If you're involved in a church group, if you're involved in a civic group, Scott, I know you're involved with Rotary, if you're involved in the Lions Club or something along those lines, and you have an opportunity for us to come speak, whether that's in person or virtually, let us know. We need 5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes. We've got a program for that. If you've got an hour, we've got a program for that. But we are available to come speak to your group and share the work that we're doing in Cumberland County, because I think it's important for everybody in the community. If they have a vested interest in the future of Cumberland County, I think Tennessee Achieves has an important part of that. And then the last thing I think you can do is to tell somebody about Tennessee Promise. And I say this and it kind of sounds silly, but I remember back in 2012, my brother did not apply for Tennessee Achieves. Okay. I was a student in the program. I was an ambassador for the program. I got him multiple deadline extensions, and this kid never did submit his Tennessee Achieves application. Today, as a 27-year-old man, he is upset that he did not take advantage of this opportunity. And I tell you that because even the student that you think is the most prepared or appears to have it all together might forget to apply to Tennessee Promise. It happens. And I don't want that to happen to a student in Cumberland County. So if you know a senior, just remind them, say, hey, have you completed your Tennessee Promise application? If they say no, say, let's do it right now. It takes 5 minutes, tnpromise.gov. A deadline is November 1st, so obviously we still have some time. But like I've told some people already today, once football season starts, you go to sleep and you wake up and it's Christmas. And that's going to happen, I think, again this fall. If there's any time that's flying, it feels like it's right now. So if students don't complete that Tennessee Promise application now, they're going to forget. I don't want that to happen. So remind a family, remind a parent, remind a student, get that in. All right. Well, I know that's fast, but there's a lot to cover, and I'm through. So that's all the content that I have for the presentation, but now we have some time for some questions. So I know you guys may have some, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask away, fire away.
Hey, Ben.
Yes, sir.
You keep burping here. You hear me okay?
Yes, sir. I hear you loud and clear.
Hey, one of the things, and this is just to throw it out there, maybe to take back to your staff to, pick apart and see if there's any possible way to do it in the future. Not something you could do right away, probably. But I really believe after doing, the mentoring I've done with the students, if I could connect with them, not in their senior year, but in their junior year, I could really improve the percentage of students that are, one, filling out their FAFSA and getting that done on time, and also ensuring that they've got the, Tennessee Achieve application done even in the fall before that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when working with parents, I have a lot of parents that are really thankful for the information I share with them. But I think, from my own experience as a parent putting kids through school, I really feel like you've got to get engaged with that process as early as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I tell friends and family members that, when a student hits the ninth grade, you better be focused and start talking to that student every day about their opportunities ahead of them, what colleges, what fields they might like, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And if you constantly having that conversation, then by the time you get to your senior year, you can enjoy it, getting everything's already kind of laid out.
Mm-hmm.
But for us to get these students, I think it's kind of late. I mean, we do what we can. I would really like to see the program move to where we have two sets of students. Like right now I have 10 I started out with, but if I had 5 that were in the 11th grade and 5 that were in the 12th grade, and I could work with them a little bit differently. And then every year, just keep moving that along. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I hear you. And I agree that trying to establish that expectation earlier is incredibly important. And I think there are programs out there that are trying to do that. Not every county has that, but there are counties that are certainly taking what we're doing and pushing it further down into the pipeline to try to get to students earlier. In terms of our work, I think our scale makes it really hard to do more than we do. I think we are probably at the capacity in terms of how many students we can serve at any time, any moment. We serve 90,000 students right now, any given day. And so if we added a junior class, that'd be an extra 60,000. So we'd be at 150,000 students. I don't know that it's like possible, right? You know what I mean? For us to manage that. But to your point, that's something I've been thinking a lot about is how do we expose more students to career opportunities, even if it's not really practical things like FAFSA and Tennessee Promise application, because like those things tend to get themselves done, especially when the student's engaged and interested in college. They're more likely to do those things. So how do we start those conversations with freshmen and sophomores about understanding career opportunities and putting into practice a college degree or a certificate from a TCAT and begin to set that precedent sooner? That's where my mind is. We sat at a group in Chattanooga of summer bridge program participants, and everybody asked we had Senator Bo Watson there, and he was asking them what gap needs to be filled for you, what gap feels unmet in terms of this experience for you from going to high school to college. And they all said just career exploration. They don't know what they want to do. They have no idea. And you get told often, you don't have to know what you need. You don't have to know what you want to do. And you don't have to know what you want to do when you start college. But I think it helps if you have a pretty good direction, right? If a student knows they want to go into healthcare, you need to get started on healthcare as soon as possible because there's no time to waste, right? And I think the same could be said for like a welder or a industrial maintenance technician or somebody that's involved in that. If they can knock out some of that in high school through dual enrollment, they enter the workforce so much faster, and that's everybody's goal. That's all their goals. So to your point, there is a ton of value in there. I don't know what it looks like though. We talked about that. We've talked about that for 10 years. And I don't know the best way to get as organized as we are a year earlier. I don't know how you do that and still manage capacity in the way that we do and reach the way that we do and set that sign of expectation. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah, it's fair enough. In your remarks, my ears perked up when you talked about some counties are doing some things internally on their own to try to better address that. Do you have some counties or some practices that counties are using that you could share with us that we might be able to use in our county?
Well, it's kind of hard. I'm not as well versed in it as some other people on our team, but there is an alliance that's been formed between Metro Nashville Public Schools and Nashville State Community College. It's called Better Together. And so we sort of serve as the conduit between Nashville State and MNPS, Metro Nashville Public Schools. And they're basically able to track a student from freshman year to career based on their progress, whether that's attendance, ACT scores, enrollment in college, FAFSA file, community service, all the Tennessee Promise requirements, all the college enrollment stuff, and all the high school success stuff. All of that's being stored in a dashboard on our website. So we've built out this relationship, and I think it's something that, as with all things that Tennessee Achieves, they get piloted, and we try to perfect them before we roll them out multiple places or even like a statewide situation. I think the next step is to move into Knox County and try that between Knox County schools and Tennessee Achieves and Pellissippi State, and then see what that looks like. As you get into the more rural communities, it's just less students, so it's harder to build those alliances where you have a giant conglomerate of students and another giant conglomerate, then you just merge all that data together. So then you start thinking through like who's the administrator over 90 of those programs. When it's just one, it's a little easier to put one staff person in charge of that, so that's just one example. But you've got other counties that, for example, a county that has a Gear Up program. I'm not sure if there's a Gear Up program in Cumberland County, but in the counties that there are, that Gear Up counselor is focused on college access for every student in their high school, not just their seniors. So that conversation is ongoing. Another example would be here in East Tennessee, you've got Douglas Cherokee, which is a federally funded organization that partners with Scott Niswonger out of Greenville to put a counselor in every Northeast Tennessee high school that's focused on college and career prep. And so they're working with students from freshman year to senior year to help prepare them for college. So there's examples out there. They're not just county specific though. A lot of them are region specific, where they've got like that, the Niswonger Care counselors that is through Douglas Cherokee and those things. I think it's just about presence, honestly. Having somebody in the building that's focused on that one thing at all times.
Yeah, I agree. I know the counselors here in Cumberland County, one counselor to 250 students, that's a lot of people to be trying to.
Well, and they're not just focused on college and career,
right,
they're focused on.
Right. That's just a small piece of it.
They're the busiest people in the building most of the time. So.
Yeah. They got a tough task.
They do.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Those were helpful.
Of course. Appreciate you, Eugene. Thank you. All right, guys. You guys have anything else? If not, that's all that I've got. I really appreciate y'all hopping on. Scott, it looks like you're in the car, so thanks for taking the time.
No problem.
All right, guys. Well, that's all I have. I really appreciate it. Thank you all so much. Thanks, Eugene.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks, Nancy.
See ya.